In November 1994, a road tester at the Los Angeles Times drove the new Toyota Avalon and filed 4 words under the car's faults. Needs a Buick horn. Toyota had built the car in Kentucky for the buyer who kept coming back for a Buick LeSabre. Buick retired the LeSabre 11 years later. It had been America's best-selling full-size sedan for 12 straight years. That same year, J.D. Power asked the owners of both cars what had gone wrong since new, and one of the two came out first in its class. The Toyota in that survey was built in Kentucky by Americans, and Toyota said so out loud before anyone outside the company had driven one. Dave Illingworth, a group vice president at Toyota's American division, unveiled the Avalon at the Chicago Auto Show on the 4th of February 1994. He called it an all-new class of vehicle and the flagship of the sedan lineup, positioned above the Camry, and then went further. Designed, engineered, and developed largely by Americans and built by Americans, the Avalon would carry more American thinking and creativity than any previous Toyota product. There was even a philosophy borrowed out of American self-help language. Americans have a saying about quality time mattering more to busy people than quantity time, Illingworth told the room. That, he said, was the design philosophy inherent in the Avalon. Getting the car that far had taken an argument between 2 continents over a seat cushion, and it went all the way to the top of the program before anybody settled it. The work was split down the middle. Toyota's Technical Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, designed and engineered the entire Avalon interior except the instrument panel, which it could not touch because it had no crash test certification capability. The underbody work stayed in Japan. Lynn Hollis, a general manager at the center, described the timetable the way a builder describes a foundation. His rule was to get things right 18 to 24 months before launch and spend the rest of the time tuning. By that stage, he said, nobody is still proving whether the thing works. His people built the first prototype in February 1993. Then the 2 halves of the team disagreed about the front seat. The American research said American drivers wanted a longer cushion under their thighs. The Japanese staff had read it the other way, and nobody could break the tie. So the dispute went to the Avalon's chief engineer in Japan. He flew to Ann Arbor and sat in the seats himself. The Americans won, and the Avalon went into production with the longest seat cushion Toyota had ever fitted to anything. The plant was new too. Toyota spent around $800 million expanding Georgetown, Kentucky, and trained 1,500 people to build the car while the building was still going up around them. Cheryl Jones, who managed the expansion, called 1994 an educational year. Keith Kidd was a team leader on the trim line there. He was sent to Japan to learn the car 6 days after his daughter was born, and he was gone 6 weeks. He had never left the United States before, and he said he knew what homesick was for the first time. His verdict on the first pre-production car was that they could not get it together. Through the launch, he worked 2 or 3 extra hours a day, and it took him 3 weeks to hang a mirror in the bathroom he was renovating at home. The obsessing went right down to the mirror on the windscreen. The Avalon was the first ordinary Toyota to hang its rear-view mirror on the glass instead of bolting it to the roof. Jeffrey Rose, who ran a design group at the Technical Center, explained why that made everybody nervous. 8 million cars in America had glass-mounted mirrors, and he said that was not good enough for Toyota. Rose put the worry plainly. If one fell off, there went their J.D. Power survey. On the 13th of September 1994, Eiji Toyoda, Toyota's honorary chairman, stood with the company's executives at Georgetown and watched the first Avalon come off the line. The car was a Camry stretched 4 inches in the wheelbase, on different suspension parts and a revised steering ratio, with the 3-liter V6 tuned to 192 horsepower. Toyota measured the inside at 120.9 cubic feet, which was enough for the EPA to file it as a large car. It was the first sedan from a Japanese brand you could order, with a power split bench front seat and room for 6. It also had a column shifter, which no American Toyota had used since the Corona of the 1970s. At a Toyota store outside Chicago, the sales manager, Dave Ficara, said half the Avalons he sold left the lot with the bench in them. Toyota named the car after the island paradise in Celtic legend and pointed it at the American living room, which by then had a comfortable occupant already sitting in it. That car was being assembled in Flint, Michigan, in a factory General Motors had already scheduled for closure. In its final year on the line, that factory was measured against every other assembly plant in America, and Flint has never let go of the result. Buick had settled the question of who its customer was years before Toyota asked it, and the man who settled it was an engineer named Ed Mertz. Mertz had come up out of the manufacturing ranks, and by the time the Avalon appeared, he had been running Buick for years. His instruction to the division was to build premium American motor cars, substantial and mature, and to stop chasing people who were never going to walk in. He also ran a communication program for his dealers called Curbside Chats. 66 episodes went out on VHS tape over the years, mailed to around 3,000 dealers every 5 weeks. Each one came with a prepaid comment card in the box so the dealer could write back. The rule he set outlasted him, and the car it protected ran on an engine Buick had already given up on once. In Buick's own 1997 press kit, the LeSabre's brand manager, Joseph Fitzsimmons, sold the car by describing the people who bought it. He called them among the most loyal owners of any car sold in the United States. Mertz, in the same kit, said his buyers wanted a carefully built American car with room for 6 passengers, comfort, a touch of luxury, and low running costs. The styling followed from that. Buick admitted that more than half of LeSabre buyers came back for another LeSabre, and that it kept the new car looking like the old one, because those buyers resisted radical change more than anything else. Across the whole Buick line, the chief exterior designer, Wayne Cady, said the studios avoided anything that could be hot one season and gone the next, and that he was after a design with legs. It held for 12 years. From 1994, the LeSabre was the best-selling full-size car in America every year until it was canceled. From 1996 onward, General Motors delivered more than 114,000 of them every year but the last. Jim Mattea at the Chicago Tribune drove one in 1992 and told his readers to buy it instead of the supercharged Park Avenue Ultra parked next to it in the showroom. The Ultra cost about $8,000 more for a supercharger and 35 extra horsepower, and Mattea judged the gap not worth the money. He liked the Dynaride suspension for keeping occupants from jarring their teeth while still holding the car flat side to side. He called the styling dull. He also wrote that the LeSabre was no longer a car just for the geriatrics. Under the bonnet sat an engine older than most of the people buying it. The Buick 5.6 arrived in 1962, chopped down out of an aluminum V8, and it idled so roughly that Buick gave up on it and sold the tooling to Kaiser Jeep. The oil shock left General Motors with nothing small enough in the cupboard, so the company bought its own engine back. By the time it was powering LeSabres, it had been rebuilt so many times that Ward's put it on the list of the 10 best engines of the 20th century. The company it kept there was the Ford Flathead and the Chevrolet Small Block. Don Sherman, who wrote that list, still described the engine as rudely chopped from a V8. About 25 million were built before production stopped in 2008. Buick sold the LeSabre on what came in the box. Cruise control, power mirrors, and keyless entry were standard on the cheapest one, at a time when the imports charge extra for all of it. There was an option group called, with a straight face, the bestseller package. Dealers built their own versions too, with a padded vinyl fake convertible roof and fender skirts, badged Wildcat, sold off the showroom floor. Detroit had been uneasy about the Avalon well before it reached a single showroom. The Chicago Tribune reported in October 1994 that the domestic manufacturers had been voicing concern about it for years. Then the reviewers drove one, and they kept reaching for an American car to describe it. In traffic, with someone mischievous at the wheel, the Los Angeles Times road test writer called the Avalon a whispering predator. Most of his review knocked down the idea that Toyota had launched a battleship. Readers, he said, had presumed a huge 6-passenger sedan from Japan ready to do a Dracula on the hydraulic jugulars of Ford's Crown Victoria. What the Avalon threatened, in his reading, was the Nissan Maxima, Toyota's own Camry, the Buick LeSabre, the Pontiac Bonneville, and Chrysler's new Concorde and Intrepid. He liked the car. The Washington Post put an Avalon XLS next to an Oldsmobile 88 LSS in April 1995 and gave the round to Detroit. The Toyota, its reviewer wrote, had less personality than the Oldsmobile, which felt like a big American car. The Olds handled better in the curves and got to 63/10 of a second sooner. Cars.com's editors looked at the two interiors and could not separate the philosophies behind them. Both cabins put a hooded oval instrument panel in front of the driver with analog gauges behind the wheel and a tidy center console finished in flat black. Their line was that the Avalon's cabin looked and felt like the inside of a 1995 Oldsmobile 88 Royale. The same piece, looking at the two cars parked together, called them awfully similar cars. Motor Week's road test explained why the comparison kept happening. Large six-passenger family sedans in America were rear-wheel drive, V8 powered and built by Ford, General Motors, or Chrysler. And Motor Week said that rule had never been broken before. The bench seat was the proof of intent. The reviewer added a line squarely for the target audience. And seniors take note, a column-mounted shifter. He also pointed out that 3 adults across the Avalon's front seat were very cramped. The Orlando Sentinel printed Toyota's target buyer in December 1994, a married owner between 48 and 56, earning around $70,000 a year. That same review dinged Toyota on equipment because on the Buick LeSabre and the Oldsmobile 88 anti-lock brakes came standard, and on the Avalon, they did not. The prices sat close together too. A 1995 Avalon XL started around $23,000, and a LeSabre Custom started about $2,400 under that. Median household income in America that year was a little over $34,000, which put the cheapest Avalon at roughly 2/3 of what a typical household earned in a year. Filling its tank cost about $20. The label stuck for more than 20 years. A writer at The Drive who owned a 1998 Avalon described his own car as basically a Japanese Buick LeSabre, floaty suspension, couch-like interior, and all. Once the warranties ran out, the two cars started building repair records that looked nothing alike. Somewhere in North Carolina, the owner of a 2003 LeSabre watched the dashboard separate and lift about 2 inches. They wrote to their member of Congress about it. The letter ended up in the federal complaint file at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, filed by the office of Representative Virginia Fox on behalf of a constituent. Another owner reported the dashboard detaching around the airbag housing, far enough to interfere with the view out of the windscreen. The part owners complained about most on the last generation car was the windows. Power window regulators failed often enough to top the complaint tables for 3 model years running at a few $100s a corner, and usually somewhere past 70,000 miles. One owner wrote in capital letters about replacing all 4 regulators twice, and about the windows dropping on their own at 65 miles an hour. The 3.8 in the LeSabre used a plastic upper intake manifold, and the exhaust gas recirculation pipe from the lower manifold sits up inside it. Heat from that pipe pits and degrades the plastic around the passage over time, and coolant starts weeping out near the throttle body. Trade technicians put the failure at roughly 60,000 miles. The complaint records agree with them almost exactly, because among owners who filed with the federal government and gave a mileage, the median was just under 62,000. Dex Cool sits next to this failure in the record, and the settlement itself separates the two. General Motors' orange coolant was the subject of a national class action, settled in a California court in 2008. The Buick LeSabre is the first car listed in the group covering the 3.8-liter 5.6. What the settlement itself makes plain is that the gasket degradation theory attaches to a different group of engines, the smaller General Motors 6s. For the LeSabre's group, the covered repair is written broadly, as coolant sealing issues including the manifold itself, which is the part the heat was eating. General Motors' own recorded position was that its coolant protected engines longer than the traditional stuff, and that the trouble came from owners skipping the maintenance instructions. A repair inside the first 5 years got you up to $400 back, and the sealing fell to $50 by year 7. Eric Gibbs, one of the lead lawyers, valued the whole settlement at somewhere between $40 and $60 million. More than 20 firms had put over 43,000 hours into it. Then General Motors filed for bankruptcy, and the claimant still in the queue got about 30 cents on the dollar. The fires belonged to somebody else entirely. The engine compartment fires that follow this engine family around were investigated by the federal safety regulator. which counted 138 of them across a population of supercharged cars. 113 were Pontiac Grand Prix GTPs, and the population did not include the LeSabre. General Motors recalled cars over it twice, the second time after the first fix failed. Those lists ran through the Regal, the Impala, the Monte Carlo, the Intrigue, and the Grand Prix. The LeSabre's name is on neither list. The 3-liter V6 that powered every Avalon from 1995 to 2004 turned its oil into sludge. In early 2002, Toyota wrote to more than 3 million owners, offering to cover the repairs for a year. The offer held only if the owner could prove the oil had been changed at least once in the previous year. Toyota's stated position was that owner negligence caused the problem. Toyota acknowledged around 3,400 complaints. Then, it extended the coverage to 8 years with no mileage limit at all. A class action followed in 2007 that named the 6-cylinder Avalon built between 1997 and 2002, alongside the Camry, the Sienna, and 2 Lexus models. Owners whose engine was destroyed were quoted upward of $10,000 to replace it. The Avalon rusted as well, in the place that matters. On cars from 1997 through 2004, the rear subframe corrodes in the salt states. Toyota never issued a recall or a service bulletin for it because the failure gets treated as environmental rather than as a manufacturing defect. One federal complaint reads that the lateral arm snapped off the subframe due to severe corrosion. The 1997 Avalon's largest complaint category is steering, driven by power steering racks that start weeping at around 55,000 miles. One owner reported having the rack replaced twice and going back for a third. The crash test comparison runs backwards from the way it is remembered too. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety put a 1996 Avalon into a barrier at 40 miles an hour and rated it marginal overall. The footwell came back 26 centimeters into the space where the driver's left foot goes. Toyota rebuilt the structure for 1998 and lifted the rating to acceptable. The Buick that replaced the 1990s LeSabre rated good in the same test. The redesigned Avalon that arrived for 2000 also rated good. So by then, the two were level. It was the 1990s cars where the Buick was the better structure. Both cars carried real defects, and both companies paid them out. In 2005, the owners of both were asked directly, 3 years in, which car had given them trouble. The survey both cars sat in was J.D. Power's Vehicle Dependability Study, which goes to the original owners of 3-year-old cars. The 2005 edition covered the 2002 model year. That meant a LeSabre and an Avalon bought off the same showroom floors, then scored 3 winners later by the people who paid for them. The Buick LeSabre topped the full-size class, ahead of the Ford Crown Victoria and the Mercury Grand Marquis. One class down, in premium midsize, 2 more Buicks took the first 2 places and pushed the Toyota Avalon to 3rd. General Motors took 8 segment awards that year against Toyota's 4. 2 years later, Buick tied Lexus for the highest-ranked brand in the entire study, both at 145 problems per 100 vehicles. It was the first time in more than a decade that Lexus had to share the award with anyone. Buick then finished in the top 10 7 years in a row. Susan Docherty, a General Motors vice president in North America, said that quality and craftsmanship had always been one of the defining characteristics of Buick. Buick was collecting quality awards through the years its best-selling car was being wound down. From 1997, the LeSabre ran between 136,000 and 151,000 cars a year. Then 2003 took almost 16% off it in 12 months, down to 114,000, and it stayed flat there. Buick's answer to that was a party. The division turned 100 years old in 2003 and marked it with a LeSabre Celebration Edition, around 10,000 cars, then built more of them the following year. The car got blacked-out grille bars and chrome-plated wheels, with 2-tone leather and the logo stitched into the seats, over a wood-grain trim Buick called Black Cherry. Annette Smith, the LeSabre's marketing director, said the edition offered loyal customers a model with a refreshed look and distinctive premium features. The obvious explanation for the decline is that those loyal customers went to Toyota. The Avalon's own numbers run the other way. It peaked at 104,000 cars in 2000, then fell 4 years straight to 36,000 by 2004. All of that collapse happened before the LeSabre was canceled. No conquest data anywhere in the record shows LeSabre owners walking into Toyota stores, and the segment itself was draining away, taking both cars with it. The Buick went first. The factory that had built its reputation in Flint was already shut by then, and General Motors kept the car in production somewhere else. General Motors assembled Buick City out of 6 existing factories in the middle of Flint, Michigan, and christened it in September 1985. $350 million went into the site, which covered 235 acres. The name was borrowed deliberately because the whole thing was modeled on Toyota City. For a while, it did exactly what it was built to do. The LeSabre coming off its line was the top-ranked car in J.D. Power's 1989 Customer Satisfaction Survey, the first American-built car ever to appear on the list. Buick began advertising itself as the new symbol for quality in America, and for once the advertising had the paperwork behind it. Then the sedan market moved, and General Motors announced it was closing the plant, citing falling demand for cars. The announcement came years ahead of the last shift, which gave everybody in the building a long time to think about it. On the 29th of June, 1999, a white Pontiac Bonneville came down the line, and a gray Buick LeSabre came down behind it. CNN's Detroit bureau chief, Ed Garston, was standing in the plant and wrote that after them, there would be no more. Buick had been building cars in Flint since 1904, and the complex had turned out 15.8 million vehicles. About 1,300 people were still working there in a place that had employed 28,000 in the mid-1980s. Jesse Todd said it was going to be rough and that it was going to be hard to say goodbye. Susie Grant carried the build manifest for that last Bonneville out with her as a souvenir. She said it was heart-wrenching that she had worked there 22 years and had never worked anywhere else. In that same year, Buick City won J.D. Power's Platinum Award for Assembly Plant Quality. It goes to the plant building the vehicles with the fewest defects in the country. As of the middle of the last decade, Buick City remained the only General Motors plant that has ever won it. No assembly plant in North America won it again until Ford's Wixom factory took it in 2007 for the Lincoln Town car. So General Motors shut the best assembly plant in America and kept building the car. LeSabre assembly moved to Orion and later to Hamtramck, and the model ran another 6 years after the factory that made its name went dark. Flint was left with about 400 acres of cleared ground in the middle of the city, in a town Michael Moore had already made a film about. Malcolm Cottle, who looks after the collections at Flint's Sloan Museum, puts the loss in terms of the work. He said they took such pride in what they did, and that if a better car was going to be made, Buick was going to make it. The city remembers it in small pieces. Melba Binkley Wilson knew every job in Plant 4. Number 1 in the world, is how Grover Douglas puts it. Jerry Kirchner. Tricky came in as a temp in the final year, sealing the cars against water leaks, and she remembers the work fondly. Alan Wachendorfer watched the demolition crews come in, under a sign that read, "Demolition means progress." What Buick thought of the customer who kept buying the LeSabre got said out loud in Detroit a few months after the last one was built. In January 2006, at the Detroit Auto Show, Buick's marketing manager for passenger cars said the quiet part straight into a Reuters microphone. Doug Osterhoff said they were always the old person's car, that they knew it, and that it was nothing they hid from. The average Buick buyer was in his upper 60s. Osterhoff's conclusion was that the advertising had to bring in younger buyers because the channel needed their lifeblood. A few stands away, Nissan's North American general manager, Brad Bradshaw, was writing off the entire segment. He said boomers did not think of themselves as old, and that his company was not going to build big sedans where people sat on the couch as they drove. Toyota had reached the opposite conclusion a year earlier, in public. Don Esmond, who ran the Toyota division in the United States, introduced the redesigned Avalon in January 2005. Most manufacturers, he said, were trying to pull the average age of their buyers down as far as possible. Toyota was quite content with the mature age profile of the Avalon buyer. He admitted he would not have been comfortable with that number when the car launched 10 years earlier. Then he said Toyota could not ignore the size and influence of the mature boomer group, and that not only did they have money, they were willing to spend it. The car he was introducing had a 3.5-liter V, 6 making 280 horsepower. The most powerful 6 Toyota was then selling in America. It started at $26,350, $205 more than the Avalon it replaced. By then, Buick's own advertising had stopped mentioning the LeSabre. In September 2002, the division launched a campaign called The Spirit of American Style, built around Tiger Woods and an actor playing Harley Earl. Earl's line was that Buick always has been and always will be the official car of golf. The cars in the campaign were the Rendezvous, the Regal, and the Park Avenue Ultra. That year, the LeSabre outsold the Regal and the Park Avenue put together. What replaced it was the Lucerne, shown at the 2005 Chicago show, which absorbed both the LeSabre and the Park Avenue and collapsed 2 full-size Buicks into one. It sold about 96,000 in its first full year, which beat the LeSabre's last. Then it fell every year after that, down to 20,000 by 2011. The last one was built that June, and Buick has never built a full-size sedan since. Buick's whole car business more than halved between 1999 and 2005. The Riviera sold 17 cars in its final year. In 2005, the Avalon outsold the LeSabre for the only time in the 2 cars' overlapping lives, and it did it against a model already scheduled for deletion. Toyota had the segment to itself. 17 years later, the Avalon was gone too, and nobody wrote down the day it happened. Toyota announced the end of American Avalon production in August 2021. The last one was built at Georgetown a year later, in the same plant that had built the first one 28 years before. No source names the day, the color, the trim, or a ceremony. Its replacement in North America wears the Crown badge, a name Toyota had not sold here in about 50 years. 30 years on, the market has settled the argument by refusing to pick a side. Kelley Blue Book puts a 1995 Avalon at $1,383 and a 1995 LeSabre at $1,372. That is a gap of $11 on cars that each cost about a fifth of a median American house when they were new. The preserved ones separate a little. On Bring a Trailer, 13 low-mileage Avalons of this era averaged a shade over $11,000. 5 comparable LeSabres averaged about $7,500. Both figures come from a handful of cars, because neither model has a collector market worth the name. Bring a Trailer has run 24 LeSabre auctions across the nameplate's entire life, and only 5 of them were cars from the last 2 generations. The best result either car has posted from these generations came in the summer of 2026 when a 2001 Avalon XL, with 10,000 miles on it, sold for $17,500. It had stayed with the person who bought it new for 25 years. That turns out to be the pattern across the survivors. The seller's parents bought one 1998 LeSabre new and put 21,000 miles on it over 20 years. Another was selling their mother's 2009 Avalon with 19,000 miles on the clock. A 1997 LeSabre Custom left Colonial Buick of Ridgewood, New Jersey, and stayed with its first owner until a dealer bought it out of the family. These are cars that got driven to church and to the grocery store, and then parked in a garage for 2 decades. In the 2005 dependability study, the Buick beat the Toyota, and it kept its owners. It was still outselling every American rival in the segment when General Motors folded it into the Lucerne. Along the way, the company changed its advertising slogan 4 times in 7 years, hunting for a customer it already had, and the Lucerne that replaced it was down to a fifth of its own first-year sales inside 6 years. Toyota redesigned the Avalon twice over the same stretch and pointed every version at the same buyer, out of the same Kentucky plant. If you are shopping for an old car like either of these, the ebook linked in the description walks through exactly what to check before you hand anybody your money. It covers the rot you can see and the paperwork that tells you where the car has been.